What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and welcome to the East and West Division semi-final episode of my 2022 CFL football pick show. And as you're going to notice right off the jump, there have been a couple of changes. Now, number one is the change to the teacup, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into talking about our great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees, of course. And the other one, of course, if you look at my face, I'm shorn. My facial hair has gone away, and I want to start the episode by letting you know exactly why. So for the last 7 years, I've been fundraising for Movember, directly for the Movember Foundation, which is a leading foundation worldwide when it comes to fundraising, research and development for prostate cancer, testicular cancer, as well as men's mental health initiatives. And this is something that means a ton to me. It's really important that I do this every year and fundraise every year, because I know from personal experience, not luckily not with the cancer aspect of it, but especially in the last couple of years, like everyone's mental health took a big hit with what we've all been through the last 2.5 years. And it's become much more important to me over the last few years with, my own struggles with mental health. Again, everybody gets up times and down times. And like I say, especially the last 2.5 years, it's definitely been a thing. So down in the description to the video is my link for my Movember campaign. If you are able, I would be really, really humbling if you would consider making a donation to my campaign, only if you're able. If not, hey, if you want to share the link on your socials, that's fantastic as well. But do me this one favor. If you've got a man in your life, doesn't matter how old they are, how old you are, whatever. If you've got a man in your life who you think might be struggling, doesn't matter what your relationship is to the person, give him a call. Shoot him a tweet. Shoot him a message on Facebook. Just check in with them, because you really don't know the great thing that you might be doing just by reaching out and saying, hey, I'm here, and you want to chat. It can mean the world to some people. So it's an important time of year for me, and that's why I now look like a giant 12-year-old. So how did we cap off the CFL regular season? Not too terribly. We were even money. Even money at 6-6, including going 3-1 straight up, picking the games in what's arguably the league's most difficult week, which is the last week when you really don't know who's going to play and how much. So did go 3-1 straight up, went even money 2-2 against the spread last week. Only got one of the 4 totals, which means we've been ice cold to close out the season on the totals. It's been absolutely brutal. So 6-6 last week. I finished the regular season 52-29 straight up. That's 64%. 48-33 against the spread, which is 59%. I really wanted to be 60% against the spread this year, and I'm going to fall just short in the regular season. And on the totals, 43%. It's good for a little better than 55.5% on the season, which is not a failure by any means. If you were sitting down and betting every single bet that you could make on the season straight up against the spread and over under, if you finish 55.5%, you're probably going to finish in some decent money. But it's certainly well short of where I started the season and well short of where I was hoping to have finished up at the end of the regular season. However, the playoffs are a different beast. Obviously not a ton of opportunity because there's only, 5 playoff games. So it's definitely, there's no room for error at this point. And speaking of how I closed the regular season, how did I close the regular season in the CFL fantasy football game? So 87.6 points is what I put up in the final week of the regular season, week 21. That was led by my MVP, Calgary running back Dedrick Mills, who got the start in that game, carried the ball 14 times for a $125 with a rush touchdown, good for 18.5 points. He was my biggest performer. On the season, I finished the regular season just shy of 1,800 points at 1798.6. What that did mean is that I finished the regular season in 5th place in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League, which is what my goal was. When I started the season slow, and I said, okay, I want to get up into the top 20. Got into the top 20. It's like, okay, I want to get up into the top 10. Got into the top 10, and then I said my stretch goal, man, if I could finish in the top 5, that'd be great. I accomplished that goal with a very solid final week of the regular season, finishing in exactly 5th place, up from 8th place at the beginning of that week. And I actually gained on the leader in that league by almost 26 full points from last week. So again, very difficult week to navigate in fantasy, but I missed out on first place by a little over 44 points. So I was certainly in the running. I was right there, less than 50 points between me and first place. That's what I'm gunning for next year. Whatever league I happen to be in, whether it's this league or whether it's my own, which I'm certainly thinking of, I'm gunning to be the top dog next year. Speaking of fantasy, the fantasy football game does continue through the playoffs. It has its own sort of separate scoring, but we get to do this for a few more weeks. So my fantasy roster, which is a shaved down roster from the regular season with a shaved down budget, but my roster for the division semifinals is right in front of your eyes right now, and it is obviously very Calgary Stampeders heavy, which is what you're going to notice. I'm stacking starting quarterback Jake Maier with starting running back Kadeem Carey. That's obviously a big part. It's more than 50% of the budget that you get for the week, which in the fantasy playoffs is now $30,000 instead of $40,000. I'm complementing them with Stephen Dunbar at wide receiver. He'll be my top receiving option, as well as Jalen Philpott. Not only does he stack with Jake Maier, but he had a solid end to the season, and I think he's going to be a contributor one way or the other for the Stampeders this week. No money to roll a defense, but that is my fantasy roster for the division semifinals. And speaking of the division semifinals, shakedown like this. The Hamilton Ticats travel to Montreal to take on the Alouettes in the East Division semifinal. Winner of that game goes to Toronto to play the Argos next week. And out west, we got the Calgary Stampeders in BC taking on the BC Lions. Nathan Rourke making his return last week, and he's going to be playing, obviously going to be getting the start in this one as well. The winner of that game goes to Winnipeg to take on Colaros and the Bombers. So in the East, Hamilton at Montreal. The Ticats finished the season at 8-10. Actually finished relatively strong down the stretch. Obviously weren't perfect, but they finished strong to get into the playoffs with just a few weeks left. They were on the outside looking in. They ran down the Saskatchewan Roughriders, although the Riders kind of tripped over their own toes in that regard. But Hamilton did get there at 8-10, only 2-7 away from home this year though, so did not find a lot of success away from Hamilton. In those 9 games, they were outscored 179 to 244. So what that means is they scored on average just barely, but less than 20 points a game in their road games this season. So not exactly a good showing for them on the offensive side. It's worth noting the Ticats did have the number 2 opposing net offense. Their defense was very strong in terms of total defense anyway throughout the season. Number 2 in the whole CFL, which included the CFL's number 1 run defense. I think just under 83 yards per game allowed on the ground. Could come into play here because, of course, William Stanback is back for the Alouettes. They were also number 2 in yards per play against were the Ticats this season across the entire CFL. The Montreal Alouettes finished the regular season even money at 9-9. They were under 500 at home this year, though. They were only 4-5 in their home building, but did outscore their opponents by a score of 236 to 220. So very close. I mean, it's an average of only about 1 extra point per game. So very, very close games being played in Montreal this year. The Alouettes had the number 3 yards per pass in the CFL this season. They were also the number 3 most efficient passing team in the CFL. Credit there, of course, to Trevor Harris and the offensive line, giving him a nice pocket most of the time. They also allowed the second fewest passing touchdowns in the CFL this season, only allowing 20 in 18 games. That's a pretty big accomplishment for that secondary, just barely over 1 passing touchdown allowed per game. The season series between these two was 2-1 for the Alouettes. That began back in Week 8, where Montreal dropped a 17-24 decision to the Ticats. That game was in Hamilton. Week 11 and Week 16 were games that were played in Montreal. The Alouettes came out on top in both of those, 29-28 back in Week 11, and then in Week 16, Montreal wins the game 23-16. So what you'll notice about those games, obviously Hamilton did not beat Montreal in Montreal this year in 2 opportunities, but all of those games finished within a single score. 2 7-point games and a 1-point game. These two teams played each other exceptionally tightly all season long. One play here, one play there could be the difference in any of those games. The Alouettes on their injured list right now, they have 3 defensive backs and 5 defensive players overall who are not practicing right now. It includes, again, defensive backs, it includes a linebacker, it includes somebody on the defensive line. So it's all 3 levels of their defense. They have a starting caliber player who is not practicing right now and is like 50-50 at best whether they'll actually play in this game. And including 3 defensive backs, it could open up a lot more opportunities in their secondary than teams were willing or were usually seeing this year. They're also not getting Reggie White. Reggie White's still not practicing for them. He would be probably on the lower side of questionable as far as I'm concerned about whether he plays this week or not. And the Ticats, they appear healthy. They held some people out. All their healthy scratches are practicing. Tim White was a healthy scratch. He's practicing in full. He's going to be perfectly fine. The Ticats seem like they're a team that's getting healthy at the right time. If you were to ask me what were the stories of these teams this year, like if you've never watched an episode at all, first of all, welcome. But second of all, the Ticats obviously are a story of kind of failed opportunities, really. Like, this is a team that's been in the Grey Cup in back-to-back years. Granted, they've lost in back-to-back Grey Cups to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but a lot of people lose to the Blue Bombers. But this is a team that came in with expectations of winning the East Division, and instead, because of inconsistent play, a lot of it at the quarterback position, they were a team that barely squeaked into the playoffs. Like, look, I sat down and did the math on this earlier today. The Hamilton Ticats, imagine how good the Ticats would have been this year if they weren't minus 22 in the turnover differential. Minus 22. I believe my numbers are right on this. 20 interceptions, 17 lost fumbles, and 15 times turning the ball over on downs. Think about that. If you took all of those turnovers, I think there's 42 of them there. 52 of them there. If you cut those in half, if you only threw 10 interceptions instead of 20 on a bunch of bad throws that you shouldn't have made, if you only lost, say, 9 fumbles instead of 17, only had maybe 7 turnovers on down instead of 15 or whatever, your turnover differential would have gone from minus 22 to minus 4. Like, just by not shooting yourself in the foot nearly as frequently as you were. So this is a Ticats team that should have been a lot better than it was this year, but they're still here. They've got a chip in a chair. They got a chance. Meanwhile, the story of the Montreal Alouettes, I think, is one of great resilience. When you think about the way this team started the season, in their very first game, one of their 2 to 3 best players in William Stanback goes down to an injury that you would think is going to cost him probably the entirety of the season. So it would have been very easy for the Montreal Alouettes to just shrink and just kind of ride out the season, or maybe look at it and say, you know what, this is an opportunity for us to rebuild. Let's trade out our 30-something-year-old quarterback. Let's tear this down to the struts and start over again. It would have been very easy for them to do that, and they would have felt justified in doing it because of what happened to William Stanback. They didn't do that. They hung around all season long. They went out and got Walter Fletcher, which I think is one of the better trades in the CFL this season. They went out and got a great young back in Walter Fletcher. They hung around, didn't necessarily do a lot of things spectacularly, but on the back of one of, if not the most efficient passer in the CFL, They hung around and did enough until now they got a home playoff game. And the guy that got hurt in the first week is now back and ready to roll. So it's a story of resilience when you're talking about the Montreal Alouettes this year. Not to mention, of course, what happened with the coaching staff early in the year. If you've been watching this show all season long, you understand how many of those ticks in the L column for me this year have come from betting on the Hamilton Ticats. I have had more faith in the Ticats than I think even a lot of people in their own fan base. And I've gone with them in a lot of situations that a lot of other people haven't. And a lot of times it's bit me in the butt. Like it really has. So I had to sit down and I had to think to myself, which one of these two teams do you actually think is better? It's been the big moments that they've consistently not been able to deliver on. And that's reflected in all of those interceptions and lost fumbles and turnovers. Critical moments, none of them almost this year have actually gone the Ticats' way. But there's no bigger moment than this for the Ticats, because most people do not expect them to win this game. I think the Hamilton Ticats have been playing playoff-style football for about a month now. The Alouettes have not had to do that. They've had to maintain what they were doing. They've had to maintain that level of resiliency that they've kind of baseline been maintaining all year long. But they really have not had to fight and struggle and claw since early in the year. The Ticats have been doing it for the last month. I'm going to go with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in this game. I think the Ticats, top to bottom, are a better football team. They don't necessarily have better pieces, but I think, especially on the defensive side, I think that's the difference in this game. I think the Ticats defense delivers a victory, and I think Hamilton moves on to the East Final. So give me the Hamilton Ticats on the road in Montreal to beat the Alouettes. On the line, Montreal is laying 1.5 here as a home favorite, which I totally understand, but that in itself is Vegas telling you something. If it's not -3, Vegas doesn't know which one of these two teams is better. And even sometimes when it's -3, they're like, kinda, home team bump sort of thing. I don't think Vegas knows which one of these two teams is the better football team. So since I'm taking Hamilton in the upset, I will take the plus 1.5 on the Ticats. Total in this game is set at 49 points, and like I mentioned, I think it's the Ticats defense that winds up being the difference in this football game. I'm going to stay under on these points, under 49 points in Hamilton, Montreal, although I do feel like that is pretty well a perfect total for this game. Let's go Hamilton 24, Montreal 20. Ticats win, Ticats cover. Give me the under on the points. Hamilton to Toronto for the East Final. And before we talk about the West semifinal, we'll take the opportunity, as always, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. And like I mentioned, this is obviously a brand new cup. My mother just took a trip with my sister to Italy, and she brought me back this lovely mug from Rome that's got the Colosseum and the Vatican, and like she stood near where Julius Caesar was killed, and it's like there's so many cool stories that she was able to give me with that. It was the trip of a lifetime for her, so she brought me back a mug, so I thought I'd show it off. Hey, do you want to show off with your friends? Here's a transition for you. Show them off all the incredible things that you just bought on nerdtees.ca. Nerdtees.ca is where you need to go for dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends, as well as coffee blends as well. That's been the big change with Nerd Tees this year. Tea blends and coffee blends, dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of them now in total, that you can get on nerdtees.ca. And when you use my promo code, which is BWFinest, that's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is an excellent value. And if you're one of my American viewers and listeners, you get a great conversion rate on the US dollar. Now, today's blend is Strawberry Daiquiri. It's a little bit of a higher caffeine option here to get me through this playoff preview matchup, and I can't wait to watch these two games. But I also can't wait for you to go to nerdtees.ca. Promo code is BWFinest. Save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtease.ca. So let's go to that West semi-final now. The Calgary Stampeders in BC to take on the Lions. Both of these teams this year finishing an identical 12-6 in the standings. BC with the tiebreaker, so BC gets to play host to this game. The Lions 6-3 at home this year. The Stampeders 7-2 outside of Calgary. So in Calgary, only 5-4, but on the road, these Stampeders were a tough out this year. The Stamps outscored opponents in their road games 282 to 175, so the offense totally exploding there for them. Well over 30 points a game. The Lions outscoring their opponents at home 289 to 186. So both of these offenses in the situation that they are currently in, and the defenses as well, playing lights out football. This is the game of the week. This is also a matchup of two of the top three scoring offenses in the CFL this past season. Calgary number 1, the BC Lions number 3. And when you think about it, that's without Nathan Rourke for half of the season. So that's A, how good Rourke was in the first half, and B, how consistent the Lions were still able to be in the second half. This is also a matchup, I should say, of two of the top 3 scoring defenses in the CFL. Calgary number 2, BC number 3. So again, just very successful seasons for both of these teams. The Calgary Stampeders, the number 1 team in the league in terms of yards per play against. So their defense on fire all year. The Lions, the number 1 total offense in the CFL this season. So they moved the ball with relative ease all year long. The season series here was 2-1 in favor of the BC Lions. That began back in week 10 with a 41-40 victory in Calgary over the Stamps. In week 15 in Calgary again, BC getting a 2-point win there, 31-29. When this matchup did shift to BC, which obviously is where this game is this week, the Stampeders came out the very next week in week 16 and won a low-scoring 2-possession game, 25-11 over the BC Lions. So the one game in BC this year, Calgary won it by multiple scores. On the injured list, the Lions trade Brian Burnham, who was not playing there in the latter part of the season as a full participant in practice, for Lucky Whitehead, who is not participating in practice at all. That might be a net positive for the Lions, but with the big playability of Lucky Whitehead potentially not being in this game or not being as big of a factor in this game, that's got to change the game plan for the Lions, especially with Nathan Rourke coming back. You want your big play guy in there. They may not have Whitehead in this one. The Stamps basically back to 100% now. Kadeem Carey, who was a healthy scratch last week, he's practicing in full. He's dealt with some knee injuries this year. And Malik Henry, he's back to practicing in full as well. Should see a full complement on the offensive and defensive side for the Stamps. I did kind of bury the lead there a little bit if we're talking about like what has been the story of the BC Lions this year. Obviously, it's kind of been a tale of two teams, which is before the Rourke injury and after the Rourke injury. Before the injury to Nathan Rourke, this BC Lions team was an unstoppable offensive juggernaut, scoring points at will. Nathan Rourke just piling up the touchdowns through the air and on the ground. I think he had a massive number of rush touchdowns, or I know he was projected, if he would have been in there the full season, I think he was projected to have 12 or 13 rush touchdowns on the year to go along with, a huge number of passing touchdowns. It was going to be like an all-time CFL season. As it played out, of course, he got hurt. That didn't get to happen. But the consistency with which the Lions were still able to play after that injury with, Vernon Adams and a little bit of Michael O'Connor in there, they were still able to find ways to win football games. And look, bringing Vernon Adams in was a really savvy move for the BC Lions. It ensured that they were going to have a kind of a manager in there, a game manager that was going to be able to steer this team to the playoffs. Not only are they there, they get a home playoff game and they get their superstar quarterback back. I think things are looking bright for the Lions. The story of the season for the Stampeders is not one that you see very often. I mean, you don't usually see a transition from a league superstar at quarterback to the next guy and have the team be at least as good, if not better. Like, I was calling for that quarterback change a few weeks before it actually happened. But the transition from Bo Levi Mitchell to Jake Maier at quarterback defined the season for the Calgary Stampeders. We knew their defense was going to be good. We knew the offense was going to be fine no matter who the quarterback was. But the way Jake Maier stepped in and proved that it was the right decision and he was ready for this spotlight and to be the starting quarterback for the Calgary Stampeders, it was an incredible thing to watch all year long. He had a very successful season. I only know that he'll build on that as his career moves forward. As far as what happens next for Bo Levi Mitchell, I don't know specifically, but what I do know, that guy's a certified Hall of Famer. What an incredible career for Bo Levi Mitchell, and who knows, it may still have a chapter or two yet to be written. For some reason, I can't get out of my head that Week 16 game. Now, that's a game that I'm pretty sure I aced that game, the Calgary BC game. I knew after the week before that, where Calgary lost that second game at home against BC this year, that they were going to come out the next week flying on both sides of the ball, and especially on the defensive side, they really did, and I can't get that final score out of my head. A 2-possession game, a virtuoso defensive performance where the offense delivered as well. It's kind of what I feel like is going to happen this week. I still don't know that Nathan Rourke is back to 100% playing capacity. Like, if it was up to me, I don't think he would have played again this year. And even if the Lions win this week, I still don't necessarily know that it was the right idea, because you got to look at the next 5 to 10 years of this player's development, assuming he stays in the CFL. The next 5 to 10 years of his player's development, not necessarily, oh, well, we got to win a Grey Cup this year. You don't necessarily. You're trying to set yourself up for a New England Patriots level of success, not necessarily like, we're going to win 1 year and then yay. It's like, you're trying to set yourself up for prolonged success. I feel like they put him in a position where the risk of injury may have been just a little bit too great. But that's just my personal opinion. Not everybody has to agree with that, and I fully understand. But I just feel like that game that happened in Week 16 is exactly what we're going to be treated to this coming week. I'm on the Calgary Stampeders in this one. Calgary to go into BC, get the win over the Lions. Calgary to move to the West Final to take on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And what a football game that is going to be. On the line, the BC Lions are favored by a single point. So once again, I don't necessarily know that Vegas knows which one of these two teams is the better football team. And look, if Nathan Rourke, if that injury hadn't have happened, maybe that's a tougher call. But I'll take this Stampeders defense over the Lions defense. Lions defense, great secondary. You can really run the ball on them, though. And I think Kadeem Carey's going to have a field day with that. So I like them to win, and certainly I'm going to be taking the +1 with Calgary. Total in the game set at 50.5 points. I think this goes over because I think we will see some Nathan Rourke magic in this game. They're two high-scoring offenses, and I think the winning team here is going to have to get to 30 points. So we're going to grab over 50.5 points in Calgary, BC. Let's go Stampeders 30, Lions 27. Calgary wins, Calgary covers, and give me the over. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for the East and West Division semifinals. I got the Hamilton Ticats going to Montreal, beating the Alouettes 24-20. Give me Hamilton on the money line, Hamilton plus 1.5 against the spread, and give me the under on the 49-point total. And I got the Calgary Stampeders, like I just mentioned, going to BC and beating the Lions 30-27. So give me the Stamps on the money line. Give me Calgary plus 1 against the spread in a game that goes over 50.5 points. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Thank you so much for watching all season long, and as we continue through the playoffs, enjoy a pair of incredible CFL playoff football games. And like I said, Movember, check out my link that's down in the description. If you got a man in your life who you haven't spoken to in a while, touch base. I'm sure it'll mean a lot to him.